Hunter is the hardest class to stay alive. Okay, hear me out. Warlocks have access to healing rifts, and Titans can create a wall for cover. Not to mention that their class abilities are tied to resilience and recovery. Meanwhile, Hunters, all you get to do is do a small dodge, and it's tied to mobility. With stats alone, you're forced to have less survivability than Warlock or Titan. That is, if you want a quicker cooldown on your dodge. Well, the build we're going to be going over today fixes all of those problems. You'll have consistent recovery and maximum damage resistance without having to sacrifice overall damage or boss DPS. With the launch of Season of the Wish, Bungie decided to give Celestial Nighthawk a pretty big buff. Golden Gun was a bit behind its competitors when it came to boss damage. Now that Celestial Nighthawk has received a 25% buff, we're seeing some pretty crazy damage come from it. Throw in the fact that there are artifact mods that increase its damage further, plus easy ways to weaken your enemies means that you can obliterate anything in your path. While there are good options out there like Gathering Storm or Blade Barrage, most bosses have an easy enough crit to hit with a gun rather than having to throw a staff or a bunch of knives and potentially miss. Solar continues to be one of the highest survivability classes, and for good reason. No other class has access to consistent healing like from Restoration, and we even have access to quickly heal with Cure. We'll be pairing high healing from Restoration with high ability and weapon damage from Radiant and Ignitions. This build makes it feel harder for enemies to kill you than it is for you to kill yourself. Remember to leave a like if you found this video helpful, and if you like seeing build videos and other Destiny 2 helpful content, consider hitting that subscribe button. With that being said, let's jump right on into the video. Before we break it down, there are a few things I want to mention. With the Solar subclass, we can easily make ourselves Radiant, giving us an on-demand 25% weapon damage buff. We then pair that with Massive Orb Creation to get an additional 22% stacking weapon damage, meaning our weapons can easily be putting out 53% more damage on a regular basis. And with this build, I usually like to run an exotic, which means you'll be mowing down any red bar enemies in your path. Now that our weapons are dealing massive damage, we start using them to create ignitions which wipe out multiple targets and give us back more ability energy. So let's dive into the build and break it down to see how it works. First up for our super, we are taking Golden Gun. Since we're using Celestial Nighthawk, we definitely want to be using Golden Gun, since it will increase its damage by 650% and turn it into a one-shot weapon. We're picking Marksman over Deadshot, since Marksman says our Golden Gun will deal massively increased precision damage. So when we hit the crit, we can do close to 1 million damage. For the abilities, we're going to take Gambler's Dodge. I mainly like to take this because it has a shorter cooldown and it will recharge our melee when you dodge near enemies. Marksman's Dodge is also good, but I like to have my melee more often in case I need a quick way to activate Radiant or generate an orb. And speaking of our melee, I do like to take Knife Trick. This throws out 3 knives that scorch targets and pairs very well with our Fragments. Knife Trick is the easiest to use and puts out pretty good damage. You could also use Weighted Knife if you want the ability to cycle infinitely between your dodges and your knives, but you do have to hit the crit for that to work, so I wanted this to be a little bit more accessible to everyone. And for our grenade, we're taking Healing Grenade. Healing Grenade is necessary because you can gain Restoration and keep it up. Ember of Mercy is a bit bugged right now, so right now this is the only way we can efficiently gain Restoration. Alright, for our aspects, first up we have On Your Mark. This is going to grant you and allies on your mark, which gives increased reload speed and handling. This can stack up to 3 times. You gain a stack on precision kills, and when you use your class ability, you'll gain a full 3 stacks. We're taking this for 2 reasons. One, we want to be able to reload and switch out our weapons very quickly. But not only that, we're going to get 3 fragments from it, making it easier to power up our build even more. After that, I'm going with Gunpowder Gamble. This makes it so that your kills with solar abilities, debuffs, or weapons will start to charge up a powerful grenade. This grenade can be thrown and shot in midair, or it will detonate after 3 seconds. Knock 'em down is super useful when you have Blade Barrage since it adds more damage. However, since it only increases your time with this super, in my opinion, 12 seconds is more than enough time to take 1 shot. So we're taking Gunpowder Gamble for this build. And this new grenade is super powerful since not only does it do a ton of damage and be able to wipe out numerous enemies in its path, but it also causes an ignition, meaning we can take advantage of fragments that benefit from ignitions. Speaking of fragments, the first fragment we're taking is Ember of Torches, now making our powered melee give us and our allies Radiant. We do have ways from the fragment to gain Radiant, so this isn't 100% necessary, but I do like it since the only other way is to get multiple precision hits or get kills, so having this makes it super easy to immediately proc Radiant when you're going into boss fights. After that, we're taking Ember of Searing, so that killing scorched enemies grants melee ability energy. But we are mainly taking this for the added benefit that we're creating a fire sprite upon killing a scorched enemy, and with this season, we're going to be scorching targets left and right. So now we're going to be gaining more melee energy, which is going to create more orbs and give us radiant, but also create fire sprites, which are going to give us more grenade energy back, meaning we're going to have basically a healing grenade in our back pocket at all times. And with that healing grenade, we're going to pair that with the fragment Ember of Empyrean, so that solar weapon or ability final blows will extend our restoration and radiant. Like I mentioned, we have easy ways to access restoration by using our healing grenade and radiant with our melee. Once you do activate those two, just continue killing with your solar weapons and you'll just continuously have infinite amounts of radiant and restoration, meaning more weapon damage and more healing. And this time I'm also pairing it with Ember of Blistering. This is going to make it so that ignition kills grant grenade energy. This energy does depend on the tier of target that gets killed by the ignition. Because we have an ignition in our back pocket with our gunpowder gamble, we can use that quickly to gain back our healing grenade when we use it, meaning we have less times we're going to be caught off guard and no way to heal. Not only does your healing grenade give you restoration, but it also gives you cure. So if you ever do get a little bit low on health, even if you already have restoration, feel free to pop a healing grenade to get a little bit more health back quickly. We're also taking Ember of Ashes, so that you apply more scorch stacks from all sources. This season we can easily scorch with our weapons, throwing knife, and gunpowder gamble grenade. Not to mention, if we take any of the exotic weapons that also do scorch damage, we're getting more benefit around the board and causing more ignitions, getting back more grenade energy, and dealing more damage. Alright, let's talk about ways to improve the build. First up are stat mods. While having mobility for a shorter cooldown on your dodge does sound good, it's actually unnecessary. So first up, I'm taking resilience and I'm going for 100. The added 30% damage resistance is definitely huge for survivability in both mid-game and end-game content. So our number one priority is getting up to 100 resilience. Secondly, I'm shooting for roughly 80 discipline. Healing grenade already has a short cooldown, and with Ember of Blistering, we'll be getting back our grenade in no time. So that should leave you enough room to have about 50 to 60 in both intellect and strength. Anything past 60 on strength is diminishing returns, and having 50 to 60 intellect can help you get your golden gun back quicker and potentially have it for every damage phase. Recovery is nice on this build, but definitely unnecessary since we have restoration to continuously heal ourselves. And recovery doesn't affect the heal rate of restoration, so for this build, I'm not particularly too keen on it. Alright, for our mods, first up, our helmet. I'm going to be taking Harmonic Siphon, so that rapid solar weapon kills are going to create orbs. These orbs of power are going to spawn and give us 2.5% of our super back. And because we want to use our weapon so much, we're going to be creating more orbs, getting our super back, and with this build, we're going to be using weapon surges, so that it's going to power up our weapons to do even more damage. After that, I'm taking Heavy Ammo Finder and Heavy Ammo Scout, so that we can increase the drop chance of heavy ammo for both us and our team. Like I said, I like to use exotic weapons with this build, and exotic weapons have a high chance of dropping heavy ammo. So increasing that chance even more is going to mean we're going to have a ton of heavy ammo for us and our team, making damage phases even easier. Alright, moving on to our arms. First up, we have Heavy Handed. This makes it so that powered melee final blows create orbs, and I mainly use this as a way to get an on-demand orb. As we mentioned before, our powered melee would give us radiant, but now it'll also give us an orb. So sometimes if you run out of your weapon surge or radiant, you can use a powered melee and you'll get them both back immediately, meaning you're going from a 0% damage boost to a 53% damage boost in a matter of seconds. I'm also pairing this with Focusing Strike, so the powered melee damage grants class ability energy. Since our dodge gives back our melee, we can now use our melee to get a bump in energy for our dodge. So we should use our dodge to get our melee, and then it will be all spent up, use our powered melee to get not only weapon surge and radiant, but now also get a little bit of bump in our class ability. And finally, I'm taking a dexterity mod. Normally I would say a loader mod, but precision final blows will give you on the mark buff, which increases reload speed and handling. So I'm taking the increased handling for DPS phases. Alright, for our chest, we're taking 3 resistance mods, and this mainly depends on the content you're in. I usually like to take 1 harmonic so that we can have the cheaper mod, which will give you room to take either concussive dampener or sniper resist, but alternatively you could just pair it with 3 different elements. The most important thing is just pair it against the enemies that you will be facing, or if there's a threat. Alright, moving on to the legs. We are going to take 3 solar weapon surges so that we're gaining an additional 22% weapon damage. I like to use this build as my damage rotation build since Celestial does do so much damage, so having the 3 solar weapon surges means you're going to be outputting the maximum amount of damage you can. And like I mentioned before, we are going to be using our weapons a ton for normal gameplay, so having the extra 22% weapon damage means it's going to be super easy to wipe out enemies with your weapons. I also like to have a backup pair of legs that I can use 3 kinetic weapon surges on, so you can immediately hot swap to them and use your golden gun to get an extra 22% damage from your golden gun. This isn't necessary, but this is going to help you do even more damage. So realistically, what this would look like, You go into a damage phase, and you should already have Weapon Surge active. You swap to the Kinetic Weapon Surge legs, you throw your throwing knives to activate Weaken and Radiant, pop your super, and with Celestial, hit for a super powerful Golden Gun shot. Immediately switch back to your other legs that are Solar Weapon Surge and go to town with your heavy weapon. Alright, moving on to the mark. First up, I'm taking Reaper, so your next weapon kill after your dodge will create an orb. I'm mainly taking this since it will help keep up our Weapon Surge. Our dodge will already give back our melee, so we don't need outreach for this one. And since we have so many ways to get our grenade back, bomber isn't really necessary either. And then I also like to pair that with time dilation, so that our decaying armor charge will now last for longer. With just one of these mods, our weapon surge goes from a maximum of 30 seconds to 45 seconds, which is huge for damage phases. Alright, let's talk about the artifact. Since this is a solar build, we will be taking advantage of all of our solar artifact mods. Those being Kindling Trigger for extra Scorch, Flint Striker for extra Radiant, Torch for extra weapon damage, Heart of the Flame for extra super damage, Revitalizing Blast for easy weakening on bosses with abilities, and finally Raise of Precision so that solar precision final blows create ignitions. All other artifact mods are kind of depending on what weapons and gameplay you're going to be doing. If you're solo, take your solo. If you're using a strand weapon in your primary, take the strand ones. Match it to whatever the rest of your build looks like or the situation you're going into. Alright, let's talk about weapons. First up, our kinetic slot. I do like to take a heavy hitter. Since we will be taking a solar primary, I mainly like to take a kinetic weapon. So first up, I do like to take either Succession or Supremacy. Both are kinetic snipers that offer good damage perks and decrease reloading, meaning you can come out of your golden gun and use a full mag while you still have your kinetic weapon surge up, and then switch out your legs. But if you don't have either of those or a good kinetic weapon to use, you could take this season's Scatter Signal. This is another great option and a strand fusion rifle. So if you don't want to use a sniper or you're facing enemies with harder to hit crits, this can do decent damage. Alright, for our energy slot, like I mentioned, we want to take a solar weapon so that we can extend our restoration and radiant on a consistent basis. I mainly like to use an exotic here, but if you want to use an exotic heavy, you can alternatively use a weapon with incandescent. This will help trigger more ignitions and refund your grenade and melee. Some great options are going to be the Adhorative from this season's, which is a solar pulse. You could also take the Amit AR2, which is another solar pulse, or the Callus mini tool, which is a solar SMG. All are craftable and can roll with incandescent. For the exotics, I like to either take Sunshot, Tommy's Matchbook, or Polaris Lance. All are great since they all trigger more ignitions and explosions, helping with ad clearing and getting your grenade back quicker. Alright, moving on to our heavy. Again, we're taking a solar weapon since we are using solar weapon surge. So some great legendary options are going to be the Apex Predator, the Cataclysmic, or Briars. Apex Predator is the #1 option, though I know a lot of people probably don't have it. So if you don't have access to this, Cataclysmic or Briars are also great, but I know all three of these are raid weapons. So my #1 legendary option is actually going to be the Avalanche, which is from this season's Dawning, which just ended a few weeks ago. It has some pretty amazing perks, so hopefully you got a good roll on that. For our exotics, Dragon's Breath is my #1 pick. It does a ton of damage and is amazing for solo play. Not to mention it's easy to use, and if you pair this with something like the Scatter Signal, you can output mass amounts of damage. Another great option would be the Heir Apparent. It is an exotic, but it's exceptional ad clearing and doing pretty decent damage in boss phases. No, it's not the best, and machine guns in general aren't the best for damage phases, but it still outputs decent damage. So if you have nothing else, definitely use this. This build is so simple to use, but yet so powerful. If you get low on health, throw a healing grenade. Use your power melee to gain extra weapon damage. Then use your weapons to mow down the field. In the meantime, you can start to build up your gunpowder gamble for massive explosion that will help refund your healing grenade. Once in a boss phase, use your powered melee to weaken and gain radiant. Pop your golden gun to snipe the crit for massive damage. Not many supers can come close to outputting 1 million damage as quickly and easily as this one can. This is definitely going to be my go-to build when I'm running raids on my hunter. Let me know your thoughts of the build. What would you change or how would you improve it? If you like the video and want to see more content like this, smash the like button and subscribe. That's it for me. Peace out.